Hey guys, it's Will here, and tonight I've got an unboxing for you. This is Warhammer Underworlds Nightvault, the second season, they're calling it, of Warhammer Underworlds. And when I first heard they were calling it the second season, Warhammer Underworlds Season 2, I thought that seemed a bit of a strange name for it. Board games and war games don't tend to have seasons, they tend to either have additions or expansions. But actually, neither of those words really fit, and actually season does kind of fit quite well. So this isn't a new edition. Everything in Shadespire is still completely current. There's slight tweaks to the rules, but basically, that is everything in Shadespire is still, current edition, as it were. All the cards are still fully usable, all the models still have the same stats. So, it's not a new edition, but it's not an expansion either. You see down here it says core set. You can play the game entirely with this. So actually, it coming a year later, season 2 actually kind of fits. But anyway, let's get this open. But before I do that, just want to say thank you to 40k Gaming who got this for me. If you're not familiar with 40k Gaming, they're my local gaming store, and they do some great discounts on pre-ordered Games Workshop products. I got 25% off this for pre-ordering, so normal price £40, I got it for £30 and was able to pick it up yesterday on the release date. Anyway, let's get this open and see what we've got in here. So, nice deep box, pretty much same as Shadespire, just with the different artwork. And then inside you've got a learn to play. Now I think this is new. This is just sort of the most basic overview of the rules. Sort of almost like a quick start guide. Not the full rules, but if you're new to the game, a nice little thing to have a read through. And you've got the instructions for the models, so we've got the Stormcast here taking up one page, and the Night Haunts, despite actually having less models, more models, taking up less space. And that's your standard GW instruction manual these days, the 3D imaging. Then we've got the proper rule book. So this does give you a little bit of background on Shadespire, and then the Nightvault, and a bit of advertising for some of the warbands, and then we chuck into the rules. And say pretty much everything is the same as in Shadespire. I think obviously anything that's been errated and FAQ'd will be included in here as it should be, but we've got a couple of new mechanics. So one of these is the magic phase, or not magic phase, but magical abilities. So as well as having attack and defend dice, there's now magic dice which you can use to cast spells, which is obviously a nice little expansion to the game. You've got your spellcasters in there, it increases the number of different options, and hopefully it's been done in such a way, I say hopefully because I haven't had a chance to read through the rules in detail, but hopefully done in such a way that the existing warbands that don't have access to magic will still be totally viable. The other things you've got, there's a scatter mechanic here. There's a token we'll see later for that, to allow things to scatter in the game, so that's another little useful mechanic. And finally, something called lethal hexes. So previously you just had blocked hexes and opened hexes. Now somewhere in here we've got some lethal hexes which do damage if you move over them, unless you are a Night Haunt, who seem to be able to, I think they have an ability that allows them to ignore that. And then a quick sort of reference sheet on the back of the rulebook there, so that's handy. And it's a nice thin rulebook, nice and concise, nothing too complicated, and a game that should hopefully be quite easy to pick up. Then we got the board tiles. So these are 4 completely new, well, it's 2 new board tiles, but they're double-sided, and fully compatible with the Shadespire ones. So as I understand it, you can use these and the Shadespire ones together. So you could have one of these and one of the original ones. And you see here the blocked hexes are marked out a little bit clearer. And then these red ones are your hazardous or lethal hexes that can do damage. And the artwork is all new. They're not repeats of the Shadespire ones, they're totally new artwork, but they've got that same sort of nice look to them, very cool artwork on those. The other one is, I think, under here. So this is really cool here. You've got the 3 blocked hexes in a triangle in the middle there, clearly representing some sort of structure, monument, whatever you want to call it. And you know, this I think is the only one that has only lethal hexes. So I think you've got 2 that don't have any lethal or blocked. This one that's just got lethals, and then one that's got lethals and blocked. And yeah, that's going to bring some new tactical opportunities. And we've got the tokens. So you've got everything that you would have had previously in Shadespire. New objective tokens, same numbers and functions, just different artwork on there, and then all the other little push fit ones. On this you've got a couple of different things. These ones here I think are for opening up a chasm. There's one of the cards that can open up like a chasm in the ground that I think acts as either blocked or lethal. And then the other side of those is, I think that's a shard 4. And then on here you've also got your scatter one, which I guess you place down, roll a dice, and it goes in, the effect goes in that direction. And again, more funky new objective markers. And get to the real meat of it, the models. So I am going to build these up for this video, but you've got your Stormcast here. So these are based on the Sacrosanct Chamber models. So you've got 2 Evocators, I think the card, Evokers, the guys who have the magical abilities that come in a squad, and then this one guy here who might focus. There we go. No, it's not going to focus. He is actually a Knight Incantor, so he's the wizard level, the wizard character. So that's pretty funky, and you know, they're the standard thing you've come to expect from Shadespire. So you've got the pre-coloured plastic, supposedly push fit, but you're going to want to use glue on these because push fit never really works properly, and you know, the level of detail that we've come to expect from GW. And we've got the Night Haunts. So again, these are the standard pre-coloured plastic push fit sort of models, and you've got 7 on here. So you've got, I think, 4 regular chain rasp, 1 like super duper boosted chain rasp called the Ever Hanged, who's like literally still got the noose around his neck. And you've got the Briar Queen, who's the leader, and then another guy who I can't remember what he's called, but he's got the keys here and has the ability to move other guys. So yeah, that's pretty nice. Then in the bottom you've got standard dice plus your new spell dice, and they seem to have 3 of these lightning bolt symbols on and 2 of these swirly symbols on, as well as a crit. So spells have actually got a slightly higher chance of going off because the supports, or where the supports would be, there is something active on all of those, but then you can't actually have support. You've got your decks of cards. So this is the one for Stormsire's Cursebreakers, and like the original box, they've got the pre-made decks for the 2 factions in there. This is the one for the Thorns of the Briar Queen. They actually come in shrink wrap. I've removed all the shrink wrap and put these in these little baggies that you do get in there. More little baggies for your tokens, which is really handy. And then the extra cards, so you can use these to carry on your deck building process. And apart from the faction specific ones, these are all fully compatible with the previous Shadespire cards as well, so might be some new tactics in there. And then finally you get a couple little bits that are basically advertising. A sample chapter of the new Shadespire Mirrored City novel. So that's cool, obviously trying to get you to buy the full book, and a little advert in here for the full Age of Sigmar game, which is a pretty cool game, I have to say, and you know, got some nice artwork in there. So yeah, that is all of that. I'm going to now have a quick look at some of the new cards and just show you a few of the the cool little things that are in there cards wise. So just going to have a look at the cards now. So we've got the Stormsire's Curse Breakers stat cards out here, and the first thing you notice, other than them being the same sort of layout as previously, is they've got this little symbol here next to their name with like this funny key shaped thing and a number. That's the number of dice they use to cast spells from what I've read. So you can see this guy's a level 2 wizard, which is pretty good, whereas these guys are effectively level 1, I guess you'd say that is. So they're less likely to cast their spell, or they use less dice. But their spell, which is here as like a special ability, needs those lightning bolts, which there are 3 of. There's the crit symbol as well, so they have basically a 3+ equivalent to cast. Whereas he needs the spirally bits for his spell, which is an attack that does damage, but he gets 2 dice, so it's equivalent to 2 4+ to cast. And those are pretty good odds, which is important because these guys inspire on successfully casting a spell, which is really handy because they have a very high level of control over their own inspired condition. You know, they particularly these guys whose spells target themselves, and basically it's a 3+, and they just inspire and get the benefit of the spell. So that's pretty cool. As for attacks, they're not as hard hitting as some of the factions in the game, but they're pretty reliable. They've all got access to an attack that uses the needs 2 hammers, so that's pretty good. And this guy actually has knockback on his as well, uninspired, and this guy's blade does only do 1 damage but has cleave when it's uninspired. On inspiring, the leader here, Stormsire, gains an extra defense, and his spell gains a bit of extra damage, so he's really the sort of the wizardy guy. Whereas these guys, obviously yes they are still wizards, but they're more melee combat orientated. So whereas they have 2 choices of attack when before they inspire, once they inspire then you get 1, but it combines the best of both. So this guy, you know, it's either 2 hammers for 2 with knockback, or 3 swords for 2 without knockback. Goes up to 3 hammers for 3 with knockback. And this guy again gains cleave with 3 hammers for 2. So nice bit of damage from these guys, as you'd expect from Stormcast. Good number of hit points, but pretty slow. And with these guys, they actually successfully defend on shields and dodges, so they're effectively on guard all the time, which is really nice. And then they've got the spell that can give them rerolls on their attacks, so not as straightforward to play as something like Steelheart's Champions, who are sort of a straight up beat stick warband. These require a bit more finesse, but certainly got some power, and that could be a fun playstyle there, with using the magic to get inspired, get buffed up, and then start hitting. Then we've got the Thorns of the Briar Queen. Now obviously these have a lot more models, so I've not been able to show all the cards in this one shot, but starting off with the sort of the main guys, we've got the Briar Queen herself, who isn't amazing in combat. She's alright, 3 looking for swords for 2 damage, but she is magic level 2, but she doesn't appear to actually have a spell on her card. But that means that she has to cast spells that are ploy cards. I think they've been renamed Gambit cards now, because there's both ploys and spells. So yeah, she can still cast even though she hasn't got a spell on her card. And like I say, yeah, she's not amazing in combat. She's pretty survivable though, with 2 dice on defense, even if it is looking for dodge. You know, that gives you a bit of a higher chance of a crit. And 4 damage, so most people aren't going to be able to one-shot her. You know, some guys even going to need 3 shots to take 2 or 3 shots to take her down. And the inspired condition for these guys is interesting. They have to be adjacent to an enemy fighter at the beginning of your activation. So if you get charged and live, you will pretty much guaranteed, assuming it was a charge that made contact, to be able to inspire. Or if you moved up the previous turn and were then able to stay alive, you can then activate the start of your inspire at the start of your activation. Flip her over. Once she inspires, her attack gets a little bit more damaging, and I think, does she speed up as well? Yes, she does. She goes from 3 to 4 on the movement. So that's handy. Bit more damage, bit more speed, but still that nice handy 2 dodge there. And if you can get her on guard, then she's going to be really hard to take down. And their special ability, they treat all lethal hexes as normal hexes and can move through blocked and occupied hexes. So basically ghosts walk through walls. It's kind of what you'd expect, and can make them a little bit harder to defend against, potentially. And this guy, he's got an ability that allows him to push friendly chain rasp 2 hexes, so push all friendly chain rasp up to 2 hexes. And that's 5 models, so that's a total of 10 movements split across 5 models if they're all alive. Other than that, it's pretty much similar to the Briar Queen. He's got that 2 dice for the dodge. These hammers rather than swords. 2 hammers is about equivalent for 3 swords. 2 damage. Goes up to 3 when he inspires, so it's pretty reliable damage output when he inspires, and again he gets faster. Final sort of unique guy here is the Everhanged, who's the really cool model that's still got the noose around his neck. Not quite as well defended, but a little bit quicker. And you know, 2 hammers for 2 damage is still equivalent to almost what some of the Stormcast do. And when he inspires, he gains cleave and a bit of extra dodge. Other thing to note is he counts as a chain rasp, which is important because there's abilities like Val Clave inspired, or just Val Clave, can push all chain rasp, and that includes him. But there are 4 other chain rasp cards in here as well to represent the 4 other chain rasp, but they are not all quite the same. Some of them have a club, some of them have an axe, some of them have a blade. So this is the club card. Hang on, that sounds like a Tesco advert. So he's 2 looking for swords for 1 damage. I mean, these guys are what you'd expect for hordes of ghosts. You know, they're pretty meager stats. 3 move, 1 dodge, and 2 damage. Go up to 4 move, 2 dodge when they inspire, so they could become a little bit trickier, and his club gains an extra dice and knockback. And we've got the guy with the axe. This does slightly more damage, but it's less likely to happen. So if we compare here, 2 dice for 1 damage or 1 dice for 2 damage. So you know, swings and roundabouts, they're all slightly different, which is going to mean it's important to keep track of them. There's another guy here who is exactly the same with the axe, and again gets the same benefits, slightly different benefits on inspiring. The axe actually becomes quite nice. 2 swords for 2, not bad. 2 dodge, again, if you can get these guys on guard, it could be quite handy. And finally, the one with the blade, it's probably the least inspiring. Is 1 dice looking for hammers for 1 damage. It's not great, but he gets 2 dice looking for hammers when he inspires, and he gains cleave. So that's nice. So they're not the worst fighters in the game, but they're a long way from the best. But yeah, that is all the stat cards. So finally, want to have a look at some of the other cards in here. So we've got this one here, Harness the Storm. So these are objectives. Started off with a couple of the Stormcast ones that are quite unique. This one is just cast a spell, and then this one is if you successfully cast 2 or more spells in an action phase. So spell casting is clearly going to be a big part of their play style. For the Night Haunts, I found quite a few that were quite interesting, things we'd not really seen before. So Death Sentence, score immediately if 3 or more of your fighters are adjacent to an enemy fighter. Normally that would be really tricky, but with the ability to move everybody or all your chain rasp 2 hexes, that actually becomes quite straightforward. And Spirit Swarm, if 2 or more friendly fighters move through a hex occupied by an enemy fighter. Again, if you're getting close, which you're going to want to do to activate, there's going to be opportunities to do that. And a couple more. This particularly against certain decks, could be quite effective. Score at the third end phase. Third end phase if no enemy fighters are holding objectives. Against certain opponents like Steelheart's champions, Magors, Fiends, who just don't tend to bother holding objectives, that could be a nice, easy 2 command points. And drag them down, score immediately if 3 or more friendly fighters make a successful attack action. Maybe not as easy to score, but you know, you've got a lot of guys, there's plenty of potential for some attack actions there. So, you know, certainly one that is an interesting possibility. So this video is getting a little bit longer than I intended, but I just wanted to show you a few other cool little things that are in here in terms of ploys. Now, most of these are either for the Night Haunts. They seem to have some really cool tactics to them, having looked through this. Not to say that the Stormcast don't, I just think a lot of the Stormcast's funky stuff is on the card, whereas the Night Haunts seem to have it more in the deck. So this one is generic though. This is Grinding Earth, and this is just an example of a spell. So this is what you would call a gambit spell. So you'd use this in place of a ploy card, and basically you choose a hex adjacent to the caster and place the chasm token on it. Now that's unusual in that it uses a token. Most of the spells, you know, have an effect you would expect, like they do damage, they move a model, things like that. But wanted to show you this one just because that's what that chasm token's for, and that's a lethal hex, but it does only last till the end of the next action phase, which is, you know, not a huge effect, but an interesting one to watch out for. The other spell I've pulled out here is Howling Vortex, which is a Night Haunt specific one, and that allows you to push all enemy fighters 1 hex, which could really screw with an opponent's battle plan, particularly if they're playing an objective deck and you play it late on, or you know, at the end of the first turn when all those dwarves are standing on all those objectives and suddenly they're not and they don't get to inspire. So that could be a nasty trick to watch out for. Speaking of nasty tricks, Night Haunts also have Maddening Cackle, which is a reaction card. Play this after an enemy attack action fails. The fighter is no longer inspired and cannot be inspired. This effect persists. So it's like, no, you're no longer inspired and you'll never be inspired again for the rest of the game. So, ooh, nasty little trick, especially for warbands that rely on inspiring. And finally, Drifting Advance. Another one that really helps with the Night Haunts getting around and getting near to the enemy and advancing. Basically push all Chain Rasp 2 hexes and they must end closer to the nearest enemy fighter. So it's basically, you know, a slightly limited version of Val Clave's ability, just put as a ploy card. So yeah, that's some really cool things in here. A lot of the generic cards are repeats of pre-existing things. So obviously, you've got another copies of things like Confusion and things like oh, what's that one I always score? The name slipped from me, but you know, a lot of the more generic ones from the starter set, all the score objective ones, for example, you've got in here as well. But I imagine new generic cards will come out as the game expands, because we already know there's going to be probably about another 6 warbands coming out, all with their own unique cards. So that's all the cards. I'm going to just finally have a look at the assembled models. Okay, so I've had a chance to get the models together, and I have to say I was actually pleasantly surprised with how well they went together. Having done the Stormcast half of Soul Wars earlier in the year, I was, you know, kind of worried that these would have the same problems where the push fits just would not go together, but actually they went together pretty well. Did the whole set in about an hour while watching the Grand Prix qualifying. So yeah, they all and that's not just these guys but the Stormcast as well, and yeah, not too many complicated parts. A couple of places where I just had to watch the instructions a bit. This guy's got a slightly weird join for the sword there. That kind of goes inside a couple of other bits, but yeah, no, on the whole, not a bad kit to put together, and some really nice little individualities in this. So I've got the Briar Queen herself, she's the leader, and she's obviously got this funky, like thorny, viney, rosy thing going on here, and she's got the crown, and you know, if you look at the back here, this is almost like some sort of ancient wedding veil that she's got there. So it's you know, a pretty fun model. I think I'm going to enjoy painting her, and hopefully she's going to look pretty cool. And the other thing that is nice about these is they don't seem to have any really weak links anywhere. A couple of the Nightvault models from Soul Wars, there's a few people concerned that they might be a bit fragile and prone to breaking. I think one of them looked like he was just like, wow, how is that staying together? But although obviously the plastic is thin in places, it's never on weight bearing points. They've always got enough plastic to hold them in place, so should, you know, survive pretty well. So that's her. She's pretty cool. This is Val Clave, who's like the other named guy, like properly named guy here. He's got the keys, he's got the little candle there, and then he's got the like the faceless lack of face behind these metal bars. So again, a nice sort of very moody undead sort of a model. The Everhanged, who I think is one of the coolest models in the whole set. You know, he's got this cowl, I guess is the technical term, completely over his head, hood possibly. You know, he's completely faceless, but you can just see the imprint of a face in there. And yeah, he's still being hung. So yeah, cool. And he's got a little bit of rope on the base there. And even the basic nameless hordes of Chainghast have all something a bit unique. This guy, he's holding his head under in the crook of his arm, which is a classic sort of undead look. We've got this guy who has got like a iron bar around his head, like he's being shackled to something. This guy's got the whole like metal mask, and that's not a helmet. That I think is like a torture or restraint device. And then this guy, who's clearly like broken out of the stocks, or even off like almost a crucifix. That's a nail going through his hand there. So that's pretty dark. But that kind of totally fits the theme of the night haunts, and some really nice models there that I am looking forward to getting painted up. Now, if I just gently move them across to one side, I can bring in the Stormcast. And again, these models were pleasantly surprised at how well they went together compared to some of the push fits for Age of Sigmar I've done earlier in the year. So you've got your leader here, and he's a nice, unique Knight Incantor in his own right. He's got the nice pose on the staff. He's summoning some sort of magical energy there, and he's got sort of that crazy old man look with a beard and the messy hair. So he's a nice alternative Knight Incantor, if nothing else, and he's got his sword at the back there. So a cool model, and they've got the the nice chunky bases on there with it's all scenic along there. There's none of these sort of plain bases like everything you've had with Shadespire. They've all got little details going on there. Then we got the other two. A little bit plainer, somewhat faceless and generic, but still nice models. And one of the great things about having two kind of basic evocators in here is if you brought Soul Wars, which I think a lot of people did, you only get 3 of them in there, and you need 5 to make a unit. Now, I did pick up Tempest of Souls, so that fixed that, but if you didn't, these two guys would be a nice addition to max that unit out, although the unit itself of just these two is getting its own match play profile. But you could easily just use them as regular guys to bulk out your squad. Likewise, this guy is getting his own profile, but could quite happily just be like a funky extra Knight Incantor. So yeah, a very nice set, and I am seriously looking forward to painting these and hopefully getting some games in. I think there's a lot of the guys I regularly play with are kind of still very focused on 40k, and obviously we've got October coming up, which should be awesome. But hopefully get a few games of this in, and hoping to possibly do a painting tutorial on the night haunts for these. They've got the cool new colours out with the night haunts, the Hexray Flame and the Nighthawk Gloom, so hoping to give those a try, maybe do a painting tutorial on these, but that's for another day. For now, thanks a lot for watching, and if you want to see these get painted up, have a look on my Instagram. As these start to get painted up, I'll probably be posting on there. My name on there is Warhammer Will, so should be easy to find me, and yeah, I'll see you guys again soon. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye.